Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I'm your host, Maryann Petri, and since 2016, Monica Shimonik has been coaching moms and dads as they navigate through the treacherous waters of the family law racket. Aside from workshops, which helps with specific problems, her 12-week signature course, The Best Interest of the Parent, uses a 4-quadrant model to create a robust healing and empowerment system so that you control the narrative in your life, not the state. Use coupon code SLAM the Gavel to get 10% off the course, and that will be located in the podcast notes. I have a great guest on. His name is Marcus Echols. He has over 35 years of experience dealing with DHR, which is also known as CPS, and family court system. He has appeared on TV, newspaper articles, and online radio over the years addressing the subject. He has forcefully challenged and shined a light on most of the horrid cases of DHR abuse against non-custodial parents in Alabama. So I totally welcome you to the show. Marcus, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Glad to be here on this show.
I'm glad to have you on. We have a lot to talk about. I hate to have you relive your story. It seems like everyone relives their story when they're interviewed, but, can you tell us what happened to you and what maybe you could have done differently or should have happened differently?
What should have happened differently is powerful people, politicians, to see this from a human perspective and not a financial perspective. Once they see you as a money maker for them, your life does not matter. What happens to you doesn't matter. That's why they use the term non-custodial parent, which is an insult to a parent that's got a father and a mother. And they also let parental alienation continue. They hardly ever step in when there's parental alienation because that helps them. And
Mm-hmm.
these are the tactics. Had I known in the beginning the tactics they used, maybe, there would have been better outcomes when it comes to relationships, because DHR can get in there and use these tactics and do so much damage that it takes years and years to recover from. So what I would have done different was to know their tactics, their tactics of not getting visitations in, tactics of putting out phony accusations, even though they cannot prove them. It's just, they just want to get a record so they can justify their treatment of a non-custodial parent. So in a nutshell, I wish I had known these in-office tactics they use, like denying the other person information, how they can help themselves. And that's basically the biggest thing I would encourage people to do. Know their tactics, because they will, and it's their goal to drive you emotionally into the ground where you can't fight back.
Right. And they cause you to lose your job. And then they wonder why you can't pay child support.
Right. And a lot of times we've noticed here in Alabama, the person doesn't have to appear. DHR can appear for them, but the person who has to pay, they have to make arrangements with their job. They have to be there. And if they're not there, they get a warrant issued. But if the other person, if they're not there, no warrant is issued because DHR is there in the building, representing them.
Right. So you're saying the DHR or CPS, they're located in the courthouse.
Yes, they have offices in there, and they're friends. Close friends. If you look at any courthouse structure and you look at it, DHR, Department of Human Resources, and CPS, they actually bring in money. They make money for the courthouse. So they're the darlings of the court. So it's going to be very hard to get some justice in there when everybody's got their hands on this money and they know this department brings in lots of money. So they're not going to be held to account.
Would you say they would be located around a probation department?
I think, well, in the case of Decatur, they're on the same floor with, the district attorney and everybody else who issues the warrants. They're right there. They can walk right across the hall and give that warrant out. And the judge is just going to rubber stamp it. He's not going to look at any cases. He knows that these people are bringing in money, and that warrant is money. It's either money through the DHR Title Title 4D program, which we all know they get money incentives for every actions they take. They issue a warrant, they're getting money.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really sick.
Yes, it is sick. And let's do a little bit of math. If each person can take their county, and you look at the stimulus checks that were taken, the $1,200 that was taken. They took $1,200 from everybody who owed the back child support. Okay, DHR under contract with the federal government under Title 4D, I'm gonna use Alabama. They get $5.63 for every dollar they collect or they attach to a child support order. So if they collected the $1,200 from these parents who owed back time, you take that and you multiply that 1,200 by 563, and you get once you get that number, then you just go to your county office and see how many people owed back child support, and then you multiply that. They made millions off of confiscating people's stimulus checks, as if you owed back child support, you're immune from the effects of COVID. That was one of the lowest things I've ever seen in the child support system, besides going to a meeting in Montgomery, Alabama, the state capital, when they were reviewing their child support state guidelines. And a county, and I don't want to be wrong, but I think it's Shelby County because they're one of the worst here in Alabama. I think the lady got up and she gave a joke that in another place she had heard that if a person dies and that custodial person knows the insurance company, they actually can seize the burial money, the insurance money. She joked that we don't have that here, but it's very interesting. A lot of times these jokes just be an introduction to what they're going to do next. And none of those 3 Supreme Court judges that was sitting up there who heard that said nothing. Nobody said nothing. And then when I got up to speak, that was the first thing came out of my mouth was that was low. It was the lowest thing I've ever seen, that
Mhm.
you could seize someone's burial money. I mean, what are they going to do next? Go to the preacher and ask that they be sent to hell? I mean, the person
Right?
died and you want to take that money from that family that's going to bury this person or take care of everything else because you want your child support money. And think about it.
Mhm.
Say you had a $20,000 life insurance policy, but you owed $40,000 in back child support. You die, they take that $20,000. Are they going to bill the federal government $5.63 for every dollar that they took? That's what I want to know. And we also need to find out about these people's whose stimulus checks were taken. Did the government actually send money and then pay them for collecting the money? Because they didn't put in any footwork. If they seized that money, why should they get $5.63 for the stimulus checks they took? They knew it was coming from the government. So
Mhm.
that's one of the things we need to find out. And where is this money going?
Yeah,
And
where is the money going? Because this is just extortion at its finest.
it is. And some people would say it's even bribery.
Mhm.
If the judges are getting any money, if DHR is getting any supplemental money to these judges, it needs to be known, and it's public information. People can go to their county administrator and find out if any of these judges are receiving supplemental income, and is any of that money coming from DHR. If so, then these judges do not need to be sitting on these cases if money is going to their retirement and supplementing their income. These judges are paid by salary. They should not be getting any supplemental. So people need to find out if the judge in your case is receiving money from DHR supplementing his programs or income. That's a conflict of interest. And I don't see why it's not bribery. Because how are you going to get a ruling in your favor if the judge is going to get money by financially punishing you? It's almost impossible to get justice. You're asking the judge to cut out his own financial source.
Well, okay, so, like some of these judges are pulled out of retirement. So you've got a very old judge of, we'll say, 68. And then if there's like a crisis, like if another judge dies, and then they pull another judge out of retirement to fill in,
Mhm.
not only is that judge collecting his retirement, but he's getting paid perhaps on a part-time basis. So that's kind of like double dipping anyway. I don't,
Right.
I,
And
I don't, Go ahead.
It's just so hard to get some justice because so many people. So you got that level. You got DHR and the judges and district attorneys all know this is bringing in lots of cash. Then you get to the politicians. And I've been telling people this for over 20 years. There is no politician, Republican or Democratic, that has the guts to really take on this system. What would you look like running for a Congress or Senate in that district? And you're talking about stopping these judges and DHR from getting all this money. You're not going to make it. The business people, the powerful people, they're going to be up against you. So it's too many hands in the pot for justice to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And a
Well,
politician even told me once that if he took on child support, he said that would probably end my career. And I was like, well, hey, I said, you've already ended a certain part of you by being afraid of that. You've already ended that part. So what else do you have to lose? The position? And he was just like, I don't understand that that would be like a death knell to your politics.
Yeah, these people are unscrupulous, and you'll have, say, a vengeful ex-spouse, and what they will do is call in false accusations.
Right.
And so then what happens is you've lost your job if you have one of those jobs that that where you have to work with kids or be around kids. So
Mm-hmm.
that non-custodial parent then loses their job, and then they can't pull in a salary to even pay what this person feels they have to have for child support.
Right.
And then I don't know if people understand that then you go through contempt. Well, actually, it's support conferences first, then you go through support contempt conferences. At least that's what we're doing over here. And then you go through support contempt hearings,
So
which
y'all got it easy than
mhm,
Alabama. These 200 warrants, they just issued 200 warrants. Nobody got a hearing. Just as soon as COVID lifted, the warrants went out.
no
No,
kidding.
nobody that I know of, and I've been reaching out to people, nobody got a hearing to explain why they haven't been paying, because they could have just said, hey, the world has been shut down. They just got these warrants.
Mhm,
And I don't think that that is right. They should have had a hearing to determine whether or not these people are in willful contempt, because these contempt hearings, we know they're rigged anyway.
mhm,
They're rigged to either shake the family down for some money to stay out of jail,
mhm,
or they're going to get that $1,800 in Alabama's case for issuing the warrant. Just for the fact of issuing that warrant brings over $1,000, brings almost $2,000. So it's got to be very powerful when you go in there. And they're going to make the accusation because it builds their story. The more they accuse you, the more they damage your job and ability to make money, the less able you are to fight back. And it makes the public, they're very good. CPS and HR are very good at damaging and destroying people's personal reputation. And
mhm,
once they do that, people are going to look at you like you owe back child support. They're not going to look at anything else. They're not going to look at child support causing you to lose your job, child support narrowing your field down by accusing you of things that have to do with children. So if you work in that field, that's over.
mhm,
That's
mhm,
over. And so once you beat into a corner, there's not much that you can do. And they're masters. They're masters at this. And once they do it, the general public, they don't want to hear anything you got to say. They just hear that you owe money and they block everything else out. That's why these labels like deadbeat, posting people's picture up online that owe money. And it just makes you look bad. You're on a government site saying you owe money with your picture up there.
mhm,
Doesn't explain anything about your circumstances, what they have done to you, none of that. And when the
mhm,
general public see that, you're not gonna, it's hard for people in this system that's victims of it to get any sympathy
mhm,
because people don't see beyond that you owe the money.
mhm. Right, and also there are unscrupulous companies that will contact you saying, "We can remove your mugshot off the internet." However, that mugshot is on several, search engines, multiple search engines. They can't just remove it off of several and think it's gone, it's there for good.
Mhm. And the last stimulus, they decided to go ahead and give it to everybody. They didn't confiscate it from people who owed back child support. But some people who have went to court since then, they're being asked by DHR, what did you do with the stimulus money? I mean, they did what everybody else did with the stimulus money. Why does the child support obligors have to explain what they did with the stimulus money? And DHR workers and judges are acting like they got attitudes that these people got away with some money. They survived during the pandemic with help from their government, but they're mad about it.
Mhm, mhm. Then you find yourself well, some of us find ourselves, being hauled into a support contempt hearing and being threatened by a judge that if you don't cough up X amount of dollars within 1 month or whatever they tell you, you're going to, they say jail, but it's actually prison. We all know it's prison. It's really not
Chris,
jail.
if you can't walk out of there and do the things life, liberty, pursue, can you pursue your happiness in there? It's jail.
Right, right. I really think in jail well, it's actually prison, but that's what
Yeah,
it said on the, building, but, you know, they feed you such lousy food, I think they're really all out to kill you anyway.
right, right. And they get huge money. And when you talk about the foods, now this is where I can relate to you at. When I went into the jail, I already had high blood pressure. And they seen it, they checked it while I was in there, then eventually put me on a pill. But putting me on a pill is not going to do any good if you're serving all this cheap, probably outdated food, high in sodium, these canned foods they give people. So you're not doing any good there. And these wardens and these sheriffs get to keep that money, so they're not going to feed you the best foods for your body. They're going to feed you the cheapest food because they have discretion over those funds. They're going to
Mhm,
end up with those funds. So you think they're going to feed people right? No, they're going to buy the cheapest food that they can get, expired food, whatever. And then at the end of that block, that sheriff has all that money to do whatever he wants.
mhm. You know, and I hate to say it, but the only appetizing thing on that tray was probably a cornbread or a cookie.
Right, right.
And, you know, and you probably ran into this too. You had addicts that were after your food,
Mm.
and which I let them have because it stunk so bad. They could have it.
It's just such a terrible place. I traded. See, I don't eat sweets, so
Mhm,
anytime there was anything sweet on the tray, people would trade me their entire tray just to get the piece of cake, and I was like, "Go ahead,"
mhm.
And coffee was very expensive. I didn't drink coffee.
No.
People would trade their whole tray just for one spoonful for the coffee. So like you said, those addicts trying to get that, if they can't get any high, they want that caffeine high.
Mhm,
So coffee is very expensive in jail, just like it is out on the streets. But they once they get you in there, you're treated like an animal,
mhm,
And I documented a whole lot of things. I was in jail for 62 days before I had a severe heart attack while in jail on day
mhm,
62. And I was only 4 days away from my court date. They arrested me on, and this is child support. I
mhm,
have went to court so many times, either on my birthday or my kid's birthday. That cannot be a coincidence. Not the last time I was locked up November 20th on one of my kids' birthday. And so after day 62, I was having some chest pains, and I was just doing real bad. And the other inmates, they seen it. And so I'm walking, ringing the bell to try to alert the guards. Guard didn't come to the bell. It took so long that I had to go and sit back down on the bunk. And so everybody else started going crazy too. They started beating on walls, and some people went up there and start pushing the button themselves, and still no answer. It took about 8 minutes. And so I got up again the last time, and I just stood there, just kept ringing. I just held it down. And the guard come busting through the door and he's like, who the hell's ringing my bell? And I said, I am. He said, who is you? And I said, it's Echols. I'm having chest pain. I feel like I'm having a heart attack. I didn't know. It was just hurting so bad. That's just what I
Mm.
said. And he was like, get your ass down here. And so I had to come. Some other people was fixing to come and help me down. They told them to get back in their cells. So I had to come downstairs, walk across to the door, and he cursed me out again. He was like, what the F you ringing my bell for? I said, I told you I'm having chest pain. I think I'm having a heart attack. I can't breathe. And he was like, well, come on then. And so he brought me out. We had to go through 3 locked doors. Every door he had to, call in and buzz and let through. He never once helped me. When we got almost to the infirmary, I was almost down on one knee and was holding the wall, and he was getting upset. He was looking back at me like, hurry up, come on. He didn't offer no help. So I gets there, the nurses throw the thing on me, and my blood pressure is just sky high, triple digits top and bottom, almost like 200. It was 190 something on top and 180 something. And they were getting scared. And they was dropping the things under my tongue. They gave me the maximum amount they could. And after a while, I lost hearing. I could not hear.
Oh, no.
No, yeah, I couldn't hear, but I could see the fright in these 2 nurses' eyes. And they were telling him something. And he was just standing in the door looking at me. They wanted to call the ambulance, but they didn't want to do it. The guards was like, wait a minute, and see. Then eventually the nurses, they just sit down and put their heads down, and I guess that moved the guards. They called the warden. Well, guess what? The warden didn't answer. He called back 5 minutes later and gave the okay. So the emergency paramedics came to the jail. They hooked the machine up. When they hooked the machine up, as soon as he turned it on, he turned it right back off and started unplugging. He said, we have got to go. This guy's in full cardiac arrest, and we can't do nothing for him here. That's going to have to take me 30 miles to, the heart center. And this is the kicker. We still did not leave. The 2 guards argued about who was going to ride on the ambulance.
Mm.
And once they decided, and the medics, they were hot. They were upset that we just didn't take up out of there. And then 2 was fussing about who was going to get the ambulance ride. So when they decided, there still was a wait. They had to go back, as they said, and get all my information and all my stuff. So they went back and got everything out of there. We got on the road, and I almost died on the ambulance, almost died on the operating table. When I woke up, I had been released from jail. So that's why AL.com, AOL.com in Alabama, they did a story about the jails here in Alabama, that when someone has a major medical emergency, they dismiss the person. They release them, and that person gets stuck with the bill. I got stuck with $118,000 bill, but I was under the care of the jail. But I got stuck with that because as soon as they called the ambulance, as soon as they found out I had a heart attack, I was released from jail. So that bill came to me. When the bill came, I wasn't under the care of the jail. So all of that went on. 4 days, I was out of the hospital, back at home. Would you believe I got a letter less than a week of being home of another court date? It said to come to court and explain why I should not be remanded back to the Morgan County Jail for the child support. So we go to court, and I knew they was gonna try to arrest me. So I had already signed up for cardiac rehab. So I went in there just to play the game. I went in there, and yes, they were going to lock me up that day until I pulled out my letter that I'm going to cardiac rehab in a few days. I mean, they were stunned and upset that I'm like, don't y'all want me to live? And so they looked at the date, and then so they scheduled a court date 4 days after the cardiac rehab ended, because I had the dates on there. They
Oh my God.
right back in the court, yeah. And so after that, I was right back in court, and they was going to lock me up again. But this time, I had them again. I had applied for disability. So I said, hey, I'm going to apply for disability. This is what all happened to me. The DHR worker, in my case, this is the only time where I almost got into real trouble. she called me when she saw me present this that I had filed for the disability. The judge kind of was like, whoa. He was kind of like, wait a minute now. He wasn't willing to lock me up, but she was. And so when the judge was like, well, there's a decision coming up to be made, I'm going to hold off, and they cut the child support down. The DHR worker called me outside the courtroom and told me to my face, Marcus, I don't care about your disability. That was the only time I almost lost it. I was willing to lose it. I was willing to go to jail. And I was like, this is just part of some of the tactics, and this is the arrogance of these people who know they are bringing in big money into the courtroom so they can treat you any way that they want to. And I've heard of worse. I've heard of people being treated worse. DHR workers, even before they go before the judge, telling people, I'll lock you up. I'm like, she'll lock you up. How can she lock you up? Yes, she can, because the judge is just going to rubber stamp that $1,800 for that one. And then they're going to collect money for you in there every day. So that was that. And so after I got all of that, they started, and they get my disability. Child support comes out of disability. If you're disabled, it don't matter. They get over, just like they would get half of your pay, they get half of your disability if they want that money. And so there's things like this going on inside the system that is just very hard to overcome, because it's all driven by money. There's a relentless effort to get money, and the best way to get money and keep abusing people is to beat them down.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you've got to keep coming back at them.
Right.
And eventually they get sick of you.
Right. You are so right. You're hitting my story. I started getting letters. When I started talking to AL.com and really ramping up my activism. Before that, when I would come to court, we wouldn't even talk about my case. The caseworker would be like, Marcus, I heard your show. I was like, okay. And she said, Marcus, I seen your website. And I was doing Huntsville Black at the time, and I was addressing child support issues in there. She said, Marcus, I seen your website. I said, okay. And she said, I heard your radio show. I said, okay. And she said, I think you're misleading your listeners. I said, wait a minute, lady. I've been in this for almost, I said, I've been in this for 30 years. I'm not misleading anybody about what I experienced. It was always about my radio show or my activism when we went in there. It really wasn't about the kid. It was about them being angry that I was speaking out.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, you have to keep coming back. Then AOL did the story. And all of a sudden I started getting letters saying, because I had like 3 cases. In 3 cases, I got letters saying, your motion to close the case has been granted. I'm like, I haven't made any motions to end the case. No, you have disabled me. You're getting part of my disability check. You don't want to even see me no more because you done got what you want, So that's the kind of thing they deal with, and what they're going on over there in Carbon County. Here's what they do. This is another way they make money. I was in jail with people who had a job, but they, like you said, they could not come up in that contempt hearing with all that back time money. And so they went to jail, but they kept their job. They had to sign up for a work release program. But guess what? When they sign up for the program, they have to do it 60 to 90 days. And during that time, child support, which was already taken out of their check, they're going to get 35% of that check weekly, and the jail is going to get 28% for you participating in the work release program. It's all a scam. It's all a scam and a way to make money. Now, no one who has a job, I don't care how far they are behind, why would you lock that person up? And I worked for the state. Once I went to jail and I was getting paid the next day, and I told the judge and the DHR worker, because I worked for the university, retired from the university. And I told the judge, I said, you're going to get paid at 12 o'clock tonight, just like I am. And guess what? $791 is going to come out of my check for child support. And you're going to lock me up because I can't come up with $5,000 that I'm behind. And he said that was the law. And I was locked up for 9 days. And luckily, knock on wood, luckily, the person over the residential housing department was my cousin. And and he was going to let me use vacation time, but I can say this now because he's retired. In the end, he didn't even use my vacation time. I had my job and everything, and I was working at a place where if you were arrested and were supposed to be on shift, it was automatic termination.
Hmm.
And so, and they knew this. They knew this, but they did it anyway.
So now, when you went back into prison for 9 days, did they give you your heart medication or not?
No, I just the part about going to jail 9 days, that was while I
Prior.
was working at the university.
Oh, that was prior to the heart
No, I
attack.
never, no, I never did. Once I had the heart attack, the severe heart attack, which ended in 3 stints. Once I had that, I haven't went back to jail. You know, I started, and the money started flowing to them from the disability check. I got letters saying my motion, which I never made, to close the case was granted. And I wrote them back and said I didn't make a motion to end the case. They just don't want to see me in front of them again. Because I'm like, I have nothing to lose. I'm going to tell you exactly how evil you are and this system that you're upholding is. And regardless of the consequences, I mean, you almost killed me. What else can you do? I
Mhm.
mean, you damaged me for life. So what?
Right.
And
And
they didn't even tell me the medicine that I was taking. I started to stop taking it, but it was helping. I could tell that it was helping, but they told me that I would have to get out, and then my doctor would have to ask them, and they would tell my doctor. I mean, why can't you tell me? I have more power than my doctor, you
mhm.
know. So that, you know, they did that to us, and so all of that was just real crazy. I thought.
Well, it's all human rights violations, and it's happening all over the world in prisons.
Mhm. Because of the money. It's all driven by the money.
Mhm.
And people, and I think it should be the elderly and disabled people who stand up the strongest.
Mhm.
Because those matching funds that all these local DHR and CPS entities are getting, that money's coming out of Social Security, Title 4D. They're ripping money out of Social Security to fatten the pockets of these local judges and DHR organizations.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't realize that this is affecting their Social Security money. The public does not know this is going on unless they experience it themselves.
Right. And like I always say, I heard this somewhere, but I like to repeat it. Social Security isn't going broke. It's being robbed by CPS and local DHR entities. There's no way DHR should be getting $5.63 for every dollar they collect from a child support order. That's just ridiculous. How are they going to get 5 times more than the actual mother and child?
And they find a way.
And there's absolutely no justification for it. And all this does is most experts agree that child support should start off low and gradually increase as the child ages. But DHR don't see it like that. You know, top economists have looked at the price of raising a child, and it just doesn't match with the way DHR is calculating it. It should start off very low and then gradually increase as the child grows. But that's not going to bring in the maximum amount of money. What's going to bring in the maximum amount of money is to set the child support order as high as you can and then fight the next 18 years to try to increase it.
Mhm.
Very rarely I've noticed people getting a decrease. If they are, you know, it's very minimal. It's very minimal. $20. I heard somebody, only one person in all these years I've heard they got theirs lowered by $100.
Yeah, and also these judges take the liberty of increasing the arrears. Say
Mm-hmm.
you owe 11,000 in arrears and you go through a support hearing, and this judge can just randomly add 3 grand onto it.
Mm.
So they have no
And it
scruples.
all helps him. He's really increasing the state's money and his money. He put that arrearage on there, which we all know about the arrearage.
Mm.
And people will look at people who owe back time and say, you owe this amount of money. Well, $11,000, may not be that much. It may not be, in probably of that whole 11,000, there's probably two or three that's owed to the actual parent. The rest of that is the interest the state puts on it for their own financial gain. If you, like I was saying, if you take Alabama for instance, if a person order is set for $500 a month, DHR is going to get $2,500 a month because they're getting $5.63. There it is right there. They go from that case, whether that person pays or not, the local DHR CPS is going to build, they're going to bill the federal government under Title 4D for those matching funds, whether that parent paid or not. And so that's going to lead to people setting higher and higher child support amounts.
Mm-hmm. Well, also these judges will hold you at an income capacity that perhaps you can no longer make.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, take a car salesman, for instance. Sometimes they have good months, sometimes they have bad months. Everything, some people have seasonal jobs, but they don't take any of that into account. And they don't take into account false accusations that caused people to lose their jobs.
I think they do this kind of stuff because those are the tactics that, like we were talking about earlier. They do tactics to try to shame, just like posting up the picture on websites. That's an act and a tactic of DHR to try to shame you into compliance. What is the use of posting your picture on there? And who knows how many people didn't get that job because their picture was up on that website.
Mm-hmm.
And who knows how many, and we do have this, and this is something they need to talk about more. The family court system and DHR, it's an adversarial system. They're not there to heal this family. They're there to profit off this family. And to profit off this family, they have to choose sides and go after whichever one is the loose side. And they don't care if it's male or female, whichever one has that custody, has the stronger thing for custody, they gonna choose on that side. And I want to let people know right now, just because a person is granted full custody in a court hearing does not mean they are a better parent, not by far. Most likely what it means is the state saw an opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Or that custodial, or we'll say the now awarded custodial parent, perhaps their attorney was in collusion with the judge, and perhaps they had a working relationship in the past.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of incestuous activities that go on within these courthouses.
Especially, I'm glad you said that. And let's take Texas, for example, 5-6 years ago, with the current people there now, Ken Paxton and the governor now, and the lieutenant governor, there was a big child support scandal. They get to hire these organizations to collect child support. Now, people need to know who else DHR, we know they're contracted with the federal government under Title 4D. But what we don't know is who else they are contracting with for collections and storing data. That's what we need to know. And so are some of these organizations who are under contract with your local DHR, is it anybody in that company connected to these judges or DHR? We have to do all the footwork on all of this. And the first step is finding out who else does your local DHR contract with outside of government entities, because some of these people are using private companies and sharing some of that money with them, and who knows, these companies could be linked back to some of these judges or DHR workers. We really need to scrutinize the people that they are given the power to collect. So if they've got the power to collect, these companies are getting your social security number. So we got to look at these folks, how they're going to collect, who are they, is it a reputable organization? Because the one that Ken Paxton and the governor and them were dealing with, they had all sorts of problems, but yet they got millions and millions of dollars of contracts with the state of Texas. So we need to know these organizations who are contracting with your local DHR with your information.
Right. Yeah, there's so many hands in the or too many cooks stirring the pot.
Child
The,
support is a hydra. You could cut a couple of heads off, but every one you cut, 10 will grow back. And
mhm,
that's what this meeting that I went to in at the state capitol, where they were redoing their guidelines. They were in there changing language, making language tougher. Anything that said may, they changed to shall. They just went in there. They just constantly going in, updating. And if somebody like me, you, and other activists, if we come up with something, best believe they're going back in the lab to try to overturn it and block it. It is a very aggressive and retaliatory. Don't let me forget that. I have known people who come in this, they see what I do, they want to be a part of it, and then all of a sudden, DHR comes out of nowhere and they tell me they can't do it. This work is not for everybody, because you have to know DHR they will retaliate. If they can, if you speak out against them and they can retaliate against you in any way, they will. She had not talked or had anything about her case in 5 years until she started doing the radio show. Then all of a sudden, she gets a call from DHR that they were outside and they just wanted to come in to let her know that her case was still active. Luckily, and she's a cannabis advocate. Luckily, the house and everything was perfect, but it scared her so bad that she didn't want to be on the show no more. And I
mhm.
said, hey, I understand that, because her kids are still small, and she barely got away with her kids when the ex leveled some accusations toward her,
Mhm.
accused her of smoking around the children. Well, guess what? She was tested and the kids were tested. Nobody had marijuana in their system, but she still was put out there like that. And his side of the family sees her as a junkie.
See, and once, a false accusation is levied on someone, and even if they fight it and they're exonerated from it, there are people out there that are so stupid they'll still believe that this is
Right.
happening. And
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 Esau knows that. They know that. They know they can put that permanent scar and accusation on you without any merit, and they don't have to suffer any consequences. They don't suffer any consequences. The person who made that accusation, once it was proven that it wasn't wrong, that person should be fired or duties cut down. And let's talk about the massive fraud that we're talking about when we're talking about the 200 warrants here. In that same county, a few years ago, I may have sent you this, but they arrested a lady. She had faked her credentials. She was over all these cases in 5 counties. She had fake credentials. She was not qualified to be in this position. And to this day, the same people who issued those 200 warrants, they refuse to open up those cases that she was involved in, or to let people know if she was involved in their case. And she was involved in paternity cases. She was involved in custody cases. She was involved in child support cases. She was arrested and investigated by the government because she stole all types of federal funds. Now, but they're refusing and saying they're not going to look at any of her cases. I think that's a tragedy, especially for the lawyers of Alabama. If you're a reputable lawyer in Alabama, you should want to know which cases did this lady with the fake credentials have her hands on.
mhm,
It's just amazing that they make all this money, but they were duped by
mhm.
somebody with fake credentials.
Well, it's like these caseworkers calling themselves social workers, and they're not. They're just inept caseworkers with
Right.
a child development degree, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them just have that and barely any education on how to raise a child, or even if some of them don't even have kids of their own.
Right, right. They don't even have the right to be making these decisions. But the only decision, like we said, we know why they're making these decisions because it's bringing in money. And like you said, a person like that, how can a person like that you just described, how could they go out and swear out a warrant on somebody? That should not be possible. But it's possible because once that warrant is sworn out, they can just turn it into the federal government and collect that $1,800 for
Mhm.
the paperwork of pushing out that warrant.
Yeah, I just can't believe this. Once you go through it, you just can't believe this has gone on for years.
Right.
And I think, like all this kind of started in 75.
Mhm.
And then in 1997,
When Clinton
yeah,
criminalized parenting, put all those criminalization in it, which can't be good for the child. When you criminalize a parent, that is not going to be good for the child.
no, no. And putting a parent in prison because they can't pay their child support is not helping that child.
No, and it violates debtors' prisons. I thought we ended those a long time ago, but child support is sort of a separate entity since it's making money. Nobody's going to say anything or really challenge it. But
Right.
child support is a financial debt, and if we don't have debtors' prisons, then why are people being arrested?
Mhm. Mhm. It's just, it's a big can of worms, which aids into the parental alienation because
Mhm.
once that non-custodial parent gets put in that position of going to prison for, like, you were in there for 60 some
60.
odd days. I only lasted 5 days, but, that still caused so much of a disaster in my family that there was an altercation between my son and his father. Because apparently,
Right.
when my child went to school that day, everybody knew that I was in prison. Now, how is
Hmm.
that possible?
Right.
Because a custodial parent has that much power to call up the school system, I'm guessing,
Hmm.
and let them know.
Or made sure it got out. You know? And so automatically, things like that, people, something could happen down the road. And they would be like, look, she's already been to jail before for that. It's gonna, like I said, that's more of that building that case,
Mhm,
creating that paper line where they can always go back to throw a bullshit accusation out there. Even if it doesn't stick, we still got it on there that an accusation was filed. And it leaves that stigma on you that it makes it hard for people and want to support you. And it's really not their fault. Then again, people need to wake up
mhm,
when you hear the government or DHR leveling accusations or somebody calling somebody a deadbeat, you really got to think about that. You got to
mhm,
think about the very tactics that they use. There are certain catchphrases they use, deadbeat parent, non-custodial,
mhm,
absent parent,
mhm,
all this kind of stuff. They're absent because you're taking them out. I
mhm,
mean, how can somebody be a deadbeat and absent if your label for them once they go to court is a non-custodial parent? They're not even a parent no more. They're labeled as a visitor. You're a
mhm,
visitor to your own child, your own creation. You are now a visitor according to them.
hmm,
And see, it's a lot of psychological things that underhanded that they do to undermine the person's financial and emotional stability. I mean, if you're emotionally a wreck, how can you launch a resistance? You're
mhm,
not going to be able to concentrate. You're tore up about the situation with you and your child, like a friend of mine had. He was just so torn up about her taking the child away. He didn't even care about the money anymore. He wanted them to do something about his visitation. Broke down, strong man, strong, he's a guy's guy. But he broke down and cried in court because he missed his child. They looked at him like he had some mental issues. They didn't look at it like this man really wants to be with his child and he is hurt because of the separation with his child. They looked at him like he was not mentally stable. I mean, are you supposed to smile in the face of your child being ripped from you?
mhm, mhm. And
Instead,
see,
his emotion was used against him.
right, and then they'll play that card that the parent is mentally unstable, but yet they expect you to pay this exorbitant amount of child support. Well, if someone's
And they're
mentally
the ones
ill,
destabilized them. The parent is
right,
unstable because they destabilized them.
right, and yet they expect you can't have it both ways. You can't call someone mentally ill, bipolar, whatever. You can't label. See, and this is what these caseworkers do: is they'll come up with some, because they don't have a doctorate in
Right.
psychiatry, but they'll come up with a false label, tell the judge, and suddenly you find yourself mentally ill, which you've never been,
Mm-hmm.
but yet they expect an exorbitant amount of child support. And this is what they're doing
Right.
to people.
Yeah, and they do other things too. Like, here's an example. This is why I don't. There's a certain politician, next to the county to me, he's just totally rotten. They had a program at the college. It was called the Alabama had this thing called the Alabama Parenthood Initiative. This is where they raise funds for parents who owed back time. These funds were to be used for training, to get certifications, but you had to attend these parenting classes. I mean, if you never had a problem with parenting, why do you have to attend this parenting class? So
Hmm.
they were getting money for those parenting classes. And then at the end of the classes, guess what? The funds were gone. So these people were duped and tricked into signing up for this parenthood program with the promise of getting one of these certifications like first step welders, cable installation. They had like 7 or 8 CDLs. They had about 7 or 8 programs for 12 to 17 weeks if you attended this parenting class. But when people attended the class, at the end of the class, the funds were all gone.
Mm.
They did that 2 times in a row. And these people were referred to this college by, guess who? DHR. DHR referred these people to that college program parenting class, and then with the promise of receiving some free training. Then at the end of the classes, the funds were gone.
I just feel they should just be abolished. They serve no earthly purpose. They are nothing but cockroaches, parasites that prey on families to destroy their children and their family unit.
Right. And if they do that, guess what? They can create generations of cycle. Because if you take say you take the father or mother, when you take either parent out of the home, it increases the risk of teenage pregnancy. It increases the risk of criminal activity. It increases everything that is negative when you do that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a child works best when there are two parents working together in their lives. Now,
Mm-hmm.
we know the American Psychological Association a couple of years ago, about 2 years ago, they published this thing with all child psychologists. They said that 50-50 shared parenting is the best outcome for a child. So if major psychologists are saying this, then why DHR CPS are not implementing this 50-50 shared parenting? They're not going to go along with those psychologists, because in 50-50 shared parenting, there is no child support. If you don't have any food over there, send them over here. I got some.
Mm-hmm.
Or I got some you can come and get, and you can go over there that they can come and get, and you can go over there and eat or whatever. You do not need this state entity in your life. They're only there to make money. And
Mm-hmm.
50-50 shared parenting, there is no child support, because
Oh, hang on.
it takes on a whole new meaning.
Right, right. And the thing is, like, I know, some people can do 50-50 shared parenting. Some people can handle it. And if you're working with a mentally healthy co-parent, and if you're not, the problem is that, you're working with some personality disorder that is going to start brainwashing your child when they're over there for 5 days on, 5 days off. And then when you get the child, you have to deprogram them, and that takes
Right.
3 days.
By that time, it is over.
Right. Yeah. And it's then you have to send them back.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where all this, high conflict and, all this litigation comes from.
And DHR, they're not going to, once the custody part is decided, they're going to deprogram the child against you, but they're going to be programming the custodial parent against you to strengthen their position. To
Mm-hmm.
strengthen, if I'm DHR and I know that this person has to pay $500 for the next 17 years, I'm going to make sure that this is funding that's going to be coming in. See, they have all this money planned out. That's why
Mm-hmm.
nothing's ever going to change. This money is earmarked for a black box, most likely.
Mm-hmm.
But what I would like to see, what I would like to see is parental alienation. A lot of people, you know, they hear that and they say parental alienation, but it is a, it's a controversial syndrome, caused by a child that because it's good for them. It keeps the animosity between the two parents. They can't work together, and this case will continue. Because if the parents started to work together, then maybe they might go out and say, "Hey, we want out of this. We're going to work it out ourselves." But the whole time, I've heard DHR workers telling females, "Well, he should be paying you this. He owes you this and that." How can that DHR worker decide what someone should be paying unless they know both lives? And why does the money has to be based upon the non-custodial parent? They should be like, okay, you work here and you work here, and this is what has to go.
Mm-hmm.
So, but they don't do that. It's totally targeted toward that non-custodial parent. I mean, when you get that court order, it's not Mary Jo versus Marcus. It's the state of Alabama and Mary Jo versus Marcus. And that is a hard hill to overcome. The state has unlimited resources and lawyers to drag you down day and night.
Mm-hmm.
It's just an impossible situation that people that deal with the court system face.
Right.
You're facing somebody with unlimited funds. You're facing someone who sometimes in these cases who hates your guts. They're the ex, right? They hate your guts, and they have this big, powerful entity behind them. What you think is going to happen?
Mm-hmm.
Abuse is exactly what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's the legal abuse, and many good, decent, fit mothers and fathers are paying dearly for this, and so are their kids.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to ask you is if anyone wants to
Yes.
contact you, how?
And these workers should not be immune to Marcus. My name is Marcus Echols on Facebook, and I have a page, Empowering Strategies Corporation. They can contact me there on the Facebook page, and I also, I can consultation with people at times, because every time I do a speaking event, I get bombarded. I
Mhm,
went and spoke at a place about child support that night, had 37 calls that night. The
mhm.
next morning had 42 inboxes, and then right after these 201 calls, this is
Oh, I think you're
a
breaking up.
very serious situation out. Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, yeah. I was just encouraging people
Huh.
to bring all this to the light and get away with these things because a lot of it is done in the dark and no one knows what's happened. Do not let anyone go to family court by themselves. If you know someone going to child support court, go with them, document who said what, look at the facial expressions of these judges and DHR workers. It is a very inhumane, aggressive system.
Mhm. Yeah, we need court watchers. We need court watchers going in with people.
Yeah, we need cameras in the courtroom. Once a judge told me, and my case was solved. I had her orders thrown out to federal court. You might not sue the state, but you can sue that judge and that caseworker in federal court. Go to their bosses. They're under contract with the federal government. If they're doing something wrong or unseemly with the contract they got in child support case, you need to contact the federal government and see how you can get that judge or that DHR caseworker into a court. And let me give another piece of advice. You might have given this before. Everybody is entitled to a printout overview payment history of their case. I know so many people who have gotten that printout and went over it with a fine tooth comb and gotten refunds back. So they supposed to provide that at no cost to you if you want a copy of your payment history. I think everybody should get a copy for their own records anyway, as well as go to your county administrator and see if any of these judges are receiving supplemental income from DHR or CPS.
Mm-hmm. Now, I mean, can you do that even if your case is closed? Can you get a report or printout?
You should be able to. You should be able to. That, you know, we know how they work. They might like the case is closed and we don't have it.
Okay.
But it's a good thing to go up if you're actively in child support, because I represented myself in a case and against a landlord, and of course I knew I owed back child support, and I knew they were gonna take it. So the people who up under my roof, we all had separate lawyers because I knew what it was gonna do to me. But anyway, they took that my part, the 10 grand, and I never saw where it was deducted. They took it in court. When in court they told me I won, they said, yo, it's being confiscated because of back child support. I never got a receipt, and I've never seen anywhere on my paperwork where that $10,000 went. I know they took it.
Mm-hmm.
I know that. I got the paperwork saying they took it, but there's no record of it in DHR. So I've been working on that for a very long time, and I just ran into brick walls everywhere. That money, like so many others, goes down a black hole or into somebody's pet program.
Mm-hmm. Oh yes, and that article that you wrote that's on AOL, I had it written down here. I was going to ask you if you could email me that AOL article that you wrote, and I could put it in the podcast notes.
Okay, I would definitely do that. You know, they touched on they you know, I was in there because of the child support case. They touched on that in the article with one or two sentences. They mainly talked about how I was released, how I and others in Alabama get released if we have a major medical problem inside the jail, and the jails in Alabama have been sticking hospitals and patients with these bills.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, you know, tell us again, how can you be reached? I'm sorry, because I think you were breaking up the last time.
Yes, it was breaking up. People can reach me. I'm Marcus J. Echols on Facebook. They can reach me by that, or they can email me at marcuschls@yahoo.com, or you can check me out on Empowering Strategies Corporation on Facebook. We give a lot of information, and we're trying to put together some type of support that we can have somebody there documenting. Like I said, we need to document these proceedings however we can. If it's even documenting these people's personal attitudes, because that means so much. People don't look at it like that, but you come into a courtroom and you're receiving it into, it's a very, very hostile environment that doesn't have to be. We're there to talk about these kids. You don't have to come in as a judge or a DHR worker like you have some personal grudge to get me. Why is that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would like to know that too. But I totally thank you for coming on the show and this early in the morning.
Thank you for having me. I'm an early bird. I've been, as they say down here in the South, you're not country unless you understand what I'm about to say. At 5:30, I'm bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
That's right. That's
So
right.
I'm wide open. Yeah, I'm wide open, roaming around at that time. But this is an issue I would have gotten up at 1 o'clock in the morning. That there's not enough people, and I appreciate you, and I'll never stop what I'm doing in other organizations. There's just not enough people talking about this issue and the real emotional impact that it has on the parents and the child. I tell people, anytime you engage with the child support system, someone is going to be damaged. I have not heard, and I want to send out a challenge to your listeners. I have never, ever heard of a successful child support story, ever. Someone's always going to be damaged.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be one of the parents, both the parents, but always the child.
Mm-hmm.
There's damage. There is no good thing about child support. And I challenge someone to tell me a successful story in child support. There isn't one.
Mm-hmm. You're
The only way
absolutely
to
right.
be a success if everybody came out undamaged with their emotional feelings toward each other intact. So you're not going to get a successful story when the government is involved to make money. They don't care about the damage. They care about the money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's very true. Oh,
And
thank you
I
again.
appreciate you having me on the show. Great. And I would come back. I would
Oh,
come back anytime you need me and work with you however you want to, because we got to keep this issue at the forefront. And I'm waiting on somebody to launch since they did not take the last stimulus check from people who owe back child support. Then why did they take the first one? I think they need to send those people that money back. I think
exactly.
they need to send it back. And if so, did DHR, this is an important question for all the states. When DHR took this money, did they get matching funding? They should not have gotten matching funding because they did not do any work. The government just cut them a check. You mean to
Mm-hmm.
tell me the government is going to cut them a check for my stimulus and then pay them for collecting it? We need to find out. Did
Yeah,
they
good
receive
point.
any matching funding checks that they repossessed?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And I'd like to have you back on the show. So don't,
Um,
don't jump off. Slam the Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms uh, that in turn perpetuate parental alienation. I'm your host, Maryann Petri, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. And I'll have you back on again, Marcus, and other guests in the future. And thank you so much again.